I'm going to hang out for a little while and give everybody the opportunity to jump on before I get started. If you're here, say hello. If you have any questions at any time, feel free to type them in. I'll try to answer them as I go along. Hi, Kelly. How are you? I miss you so much. I spent such a beautiful 5 days in South Florida in the sun and the heat, and woke up this morning and it was raining and it felt like I was back in the Pacific Northwest again. Not what I wanted after all the nice warm sunshine and fun I had. How are my kids? I know, right? I'll be back soon, I promise. Even if I have to fly out to see you. Well, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Just over the past few weeks, I have been thinking about or reflecting on some things that have happened to me throughout my life, and I was just called to hop on here and share my story. There's some of you who may know little bits and pieces of it. Some of you may know the whole thing, but just being able to sit with my sister over the past couple of weeks and discuss some things with her, I've been able to get some clarity on some things and some closure, and there's some things I'm ready to share. I think it may be able to help some people. Let's see. Oh gosh. Ollie wants to know when we're going to come back. He said I've been gone too long already, Blaine. Okay, so I tried to think about where to begin because it's always a little difficult because my story kind of jumps all over the place. But one of the things that's come up recently, I had posted on Facebook regarding, hi, Stephanie, I love you, regarding womb trauma and regarding some trauma around my biological mother and things that surrounded that. So a little backstory is my mom, my biological mom, was on drugs and lived a rough lifestyle. I don't know everything because I was never able to develop a relationship with her in order to find out those answers and get questions to some of the things. But through talking through family members, I do know little bits and pieces. But she wound up getting pregnant, and when she found out she was pregnant, she did not want to have the child. She wanted to have an abortion, and she brought that to her parents. and her mother and her stepfather said that if she remained clean and sober throughout the pregnancy and had the baby, that they would adopt me when I was born and take care of me. So they had the paperwork all drawn out. My grandparents, my maternal grandparents, were the ones to have guardianship over me from the time I was born. My mother signed all of her rights away. My mother was not the first person to hold me. My grandmother was. So there's that, the skin on skin bonding never happened. I was carried in a womb for 9 months by a woman who did not want the child. So there's lots of trauma that's surrounding that. When it's kind of funny because, I knew I had a few pictures of my biological mom, but when I got to my sister's house a couple of weeks ago, she had my box of pictures from growing up, and there were 2 pictures of my biological mother holding me as a newborn, the same month that I was born. And in both pictures, her head is cut off. So it kind of, I don't know, I'm sitting with that energy right now to try to see what I feel into that. But yeah, my grandmother was the first one to hold me. They took care of me from the time I was born. My mom did continue to live with them for a short time. What I was told by my grandmother, who I will refer to as my mama, what I was told by my mama is when I was 2 weeks old, my biological mom took me from the house, and my grandmother did not know where she took me. After my grandmother asked some questions to my biological mom's friends, it came out that she had taken me to a drug dealer's house and had traded me for drugs. So at 2 weeks old, my biological mother kidnapped me and traded me for drugs. My biological father, he made up an excuse to have to go back to his home state once he found out that my mom was pregnant. And he said that his father was sick, that he needed to go care for his father. And once his father was well, that he would be back and marry my mom and take care of the baby. So he left and was gone for a while, and no one knew how to contact him. My grandmother found his mother's number written on a piece of paper, and she called his mother and explained what was going on, told his mother that he had a woman pregnant here in Florida and that he was supposed to come back and marry her and take care of the child. And his mother told my grandmother, I'm not sure how he's supposed to do that when he's married with a child on the way here. So this man had another family of his own already when he got my mother pregnant with me. So we never heard anything else from him ever. From what I understand, my paternal grandparents sent a care package and some clothes and gifts for me when I was little. And my maternal grandmother said that she didn't think it would be a good idea if they were to be in my life. So that relationship was ended at that time. So I knew I had a dad. I did not know him. I did not know his family. That did come out eventually in the early 90s because my grandmother received assistance for caring for me. The state began asking questions on where my father was. And when she told them what she knew, which wasn't a whole lot, they started doing their own research and found his sister. And we had contact for a short time in the early 90s. I found out that my dad passed away at 27 years old in 1983 of a massive heart attack. He had 4 or 5 other children. So I was never able to build that relationship. There's a lot of abandonment issues in my life. Abandonment from my biological mother, abandonment from my biological father, lots of abandonment issues. So that's a little bit about my mom and dad. They kind of pop back in and out of my story here and there as I go through. But so as a small child growing up, my brothers and sisters were moved out of the house when I was young. So I was spoiled. I was spoiled rotten. I got whatever I wanted. I had every toy. I had all the girls' toys, so they started buying me boys' toys. I was just a spoiled little brat. I admit it. Um, what my parents did not know is that from around the age of 4 until I was about 14 years old, myself, along with several other kids in the neighborhood, were being sexually molested by one man in particular. And that was a lot. So I had some behavioral issues. Looking back on my report cards throughout school, I see a lot of patterns of behavioral patterns that I know now were me acting out because of the things that I was going through. The sexual molestation started out as I don't know if you could put minor or mild or that kind of word on something like sexual abuse or sexual trauma, but it was just touch in the beginning, and then as my age progressed, the type of abuse progressed. At 7 years old, I remember being tied up and bound and raped by this man who at that time was in his 50s or 60s. Sorry, I get choked up a little bit. That abuse went on for many, many years. At one point, I had a knife held to my throat. At another point, I had a gun held to my head, and my life was threatened, and my family's life was threatened. So when you're in fear for your life and in fear for your family's life, at times you will keep quiet, and because you're afraid of what might happen if you do come forward. So it was very difficult dealing with that, and there were other men involved. I know of 3. Pretty sure 2 of them are no longer walking on this earth. One of them I know is. That's what caused me to start drinking when I was 10 years old. I remember getting into the refrigerator because both my parents drank. My dad just recently passed away due to his alcoholism. My mom, she drank up until I was about 12 or 13 years old. She did go into recovery and get sober, and she died sober with about 9 years. But yeah, there was a lot of alcohol, a lot of partying going on in the family, a lot of company always over, a lot of people always over. And it was easy for me to drink because everyone around was drinking. So that started my alcoholism. I started by drinking. I started drinking and started smoking when I was 10 years old. By the time I was 13, I had started smoking pot. I didn't do any hard drugs until my mom passed away in 1999, and that's when I went off the deep end. So in high school, I remember me and 2 other girls decided that we were going to go to the school counselor and tell on this man for the things that he was doing to us. We did not know by going to the school counselor that was going to get the police involved. So by the time we left school, the police were already at my house. The police had already been to the other girl's house, and while they were at my house, their mother went and confronted the man, which tipped him off that the police were on him, and he bolted. We didn't know for a long time where he went. We didn't know. We didn't know where he went. We did know that he had family in Texas because they had lived in our neighborhood for a long time. So we had our suspicions of where he could have went, but we do now know that he did go to Mexico. He did screw up at one point and cross over into the border into Brownsville, Texas, and was arrested on his charges. During that time, it was probably a year or two that he was on the run before he was arrested. His house was right behind our house. Him and his wife were always at our house. He knew which bedroom window was mine. He knew the whole layout of the house. So at that time, that's when I started sleeping in the bedroom with my mom. I would sleep on her bedroom floor. I would sleep in the bed with her, but I never slept in my room by myself again because I was too scared. I never slept in my room until I got my own apartment when I was 18 years old. Those are the traumas that I keep piecing back together, and it was kind of funny. Blaine and I, when we were in Oregon, one of my trauma responses is mini blinds always have to be turned a certain way because I've always felt that you can look down inside them. And I was always scared that he was going to peek down inside my room and see if I was in bed or not. So I always had to make sure that the mini blinds were turned up. Blaine and I were in Oregon and we were staying on the second floor, and I went to turn the mini blinds up, and I had a moment of clarity and realized that what I was doing was irrational because I'm on a second floor and nobody's going to be looking down the mini blinds. So I've tried to work on breaking free from that little tick that I have with the mini blinds. So when he crossed over into Texas and got arrested, we had to give depositions and was preparing for court. And two of the girls were twins, and the social worker got their stories mixed up. So when we went and gave depositions, their stories didn't match, so their case was thrown out, and he was only charged for me. He got 5 years in prison. He got 12 years, 5 years in prison, and 7 years probation. Is that enough? Fuck no. Do I think he deserves to die? I don't like that. I don't like that. I wish death on anybody, but he's a sick man. I try to have a lot of compassion these days because I don't know what he went through for him to act like that. So obviously he's had to have his own traumas. Let's see. Let me jump back a little bit because right around this time, I was 14 or 15 when I met what turned out to be my first husband, Joe. He's the one that got me smoking pot for the first time. So I remember one day I was waiting on him to come get me, and the doorbell rang, and my dad yelled down the hallway that somebody was here to see me. And when I opened the door, I saw this woman standing down at the hallway, and she did not look clean. She looked like a streetwalker. And I asked my dad, who is that? And he told me that was my biological mom. So this was the first time that I got to meet my biological mom since I was born. That was quite an experience. There was a lot of trauma involved in that. We ended up catching her prostituting in my clothes. She stole all my clothes. She stole my aunt's car. She stole keys to businesses. She done a lot of stuff in the short time that she was there. So that was a great first experience of meeting my mom. Only met her one other time, and that was when our mom passed away. She came up for the funeral, and she did a bunch of crap at that time too. So it was just another kind of solidification of I'm glad that I was where I was, and I'm glad that my grandparents adopted me, because if not, who knows where I would have ended up. In 1999, my grandmother that raised me, my mama, passed away. She was diagnosed with cancer, and she fought hard. And when I lost her, that's when I lost myself. I lost faith. I thought, if there was a God, how could he take somebody from me? How could he let all of these things happen to me? I hooked on ecstasy. I started working in the strip clubs. I was in the adult entertainment industry for about 6 years, and everything that you get wrapped up in those atmospheres. I began doing cocaine, and that was when my life really took a turn for the worse, because I really, really liked that drug, or at least I thought I liked that drug. I liked what that drug did to me, how it helped me escape. I liked how it helped me drink a lot more. But that drug led me to some of the deepest, darkest places of my life. I ended up leaving Joe after 10 years because this was before I started doing cocaine. He had an addiction to ecstasy, and did not want to choose that drug, me over that drug. And I ended up leaving that relationship. He, a few years ago, passed away of a drug overdose. So his life did not get any better. When I left Joe, I jumped into another relationship, and I was a bouncer at the strip club I was working at, not knowing him too well. I did not know that he was a drug dealer. His drug that he was dealing was cocaine. That's when I tried cocaine, and that's when I went off to the races. That relationship, and the relationship with that man, and the relationship with that drug, led me to a life of sleeping on the streets, sleeping in a car, sleeping wherever I could, pawning everything, selling everything, strong armed robbery, robbing people at ATMs, lots of theft, lots of shoplifting, anything I could do to get a little bit of cash to get some more cocaine. So yeah, the life of homelessness really taught me a lot that I can carry over into my life today. I did not look at it as lessons when I was in that moment, but now I can look at it and see all the lessons in there. After being an exotic dancer, it was really hard to hold a regular job, so I bounced around from one restaurant to another restaurant, from another restaurant to another restaurant. Waitressing here and there, bartending there, cocktail waitressing there. It was really hard because you go from making $1,000 a night to $1,000 a month. It's a little difficult. Wow, it's crazy. I stayed in that relationship for 3 years with the man who loved to do cocaine and sell cocaine. We had stolen a bunch of money from a company he was working for, and they found out and gave us the option of either leaving town or facing charges. So we decided to skip town. We went down to Paca near Orlando for a while. And down there, I had become tired. I was really tired of doing the drugs. I was tired of that life. I was tired of not having any money. I was tired of the depression that came along with it. So I ended up going to him and giving him the ultimatum and said, look, we can split our money. You can do what you want. I'll do what I want. If you want to continue using drugs, continue using drugs. But that's not the life that I want to live anymore. I was working at the bowling alley, and I went to work one night, and when I got home, the energy was different, and I started looking around, and he had left me. He had left me down in Apopka, and where I didn't know anybody. I'm from Jacksonville. So I called my daddy and told him that I was coming back to Jacksonville. I sold everything I could and packed what I could in suitcases and got on a Greyhound bus and ended up back in Jacksonville at my dad's house. Love you. So I ended up at my dad's back in Jacksonville. Like I mentioned earlier, my dad's an alcoholic, so that was the environment that I was familiar with and comfortable with. I immediately, my nephew came over. We had done drugs together growing up. He came over and we went out, and I was back off to the races again. This was in 2004. 2005. In 2005 is when I met my now ex-husband, Michael. My MO, I was in a bar at beer. I went home with him that night, and we were together for 16 years. When we met, he did not know I was a drug addict. I was still heavily into cocaine then, and definitely still a heavy alcoholic. So he had no idea. We were together. We got our first house together. And one night he was at work, and I disappeared and never came home. It was a few days out, and he finally contacted my family, and my family told him that I was a drug addict. And so he finally learned the truth. They told him where I was at, what drug house I was shacked up at. So he came over and said that he wanted to help me, and he wanted to get me into recovery and get me into rehab. And at that time, I wasn't ready yet. A few days later, I received a call that my aunt had passed away, and I needed to go to Ohio. And he had offered to get a rental car for me to go to Ohio to be with my family. And when I got back from that trip is when I went into rehab for the first time. It was an intensive outpatient program. So you go during the day and you go home at night, and you have homework and all that stuff. I would go to intensive outpatient during the day. And when I would leave there, I would go to the bar and do my homework. Yeah. So I just wasn't ready at that time. I wasn't ready to get sober at that time. I did stay clean from cocaine for about a year. In 2007, I picked up cocaine again. And that was a very short stint because I caused a bunch of drama, because that's what happens when you're wrapped up in that game. And I was faced with some options, and I chose to go into intensive outpatient again. That time I did stay clean and sober from drugs and alcohol for almost 2 years. I still have not touched chemical drugs to this day. I have done pain pills when they were prescribed to me, as they were prescribed to me, but I have not touched any cocaine or any chemical substances since 2007. In 2009, I did pick up the bottle again, and my alcoholism got progressively worse. Over those 6 years, I failed out of nursing school, almost failed out of occupational therapy school, lost relationships with everybody in my life. So in 2015, I was in occupational therapy school and went in, stayed up all night long studying for my final exam, intoxicated. Went in to take my final exam drunk and didn't do too well. Imagine that. I failed the final exam, and the director of the occupational therapy program offered me one last opportunity to get my shit together. So I had to take a semester off, and during that semester is when I finally surrendered to my alcoholism and stopped drinking after one last hoorah, you know. So on June 13th, 2015, June 12th, 2013, I had my last drunk. And it wasn't a pretty one. But I did get back into the occupational therapy program. I did pass. I now have 2 college degrees. I have almost 7 years sober. It's really difficult hearing people say they can't when I know that anything is possible because I've been through so much. I've had so many little things because of because of the environment that I surrounded myself in. I was thrown into a car one time and taken to what I now know would have been a human trafficking situation. I was able to jump out of the car and escape. Because of the prescription medications in my health, I was on over 20 different prescription medications, which caused me to almost die. During that time, I was on so many medications. My hearing went out. So I went on, I was in school and I couldn't hear my instructor. So they told me to go get a hearing test done. I went and got a hearing test done, and I was diagnosed severely hearing impaired and wore hearing aids from 2016. In 2019, when I threw the blood clot and ended up getting off all the medications, as I titrated off all the medications, when I would put my hearing aids in, I couldn't hear. So I went to my audiologist, and she ran extensive tests on me, and my hearing came back to normal. There's just so many little bits and pieces that are scattered throughout there that are like little miracles. And it's unbelievable that I am where I am today. It's still hard for me to believe. So I suffered tons of trauma, and went to lots of therapy, and the therapy caused a lot more trauma.